everybody. Welcome to another episode from Your Own Pathway Therapy Conversations, where we talk about what most therapists only whisper about. For those who don't know me, my name is Paya. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, turned empowerment life coach, and organizational leadership consultant. And here we speak on the topics that we've been conditioned to stay quiet about, the ones that often rock the boat. But here, you know what? We're not protecting the silence. We're breaking it. So let's own it. And today's episode is not going to probably be relatable to everybody. And for those who don't relate to this, I want to say you are very fortunate that this topic or today's episode does not relate to you. And unfortunately, the reality is that for a lot of pre licensed and even current fully licensed therapists, this is something that a lot of us went through. And I am talking about the trauma and the abuse hidden in clinical supervision. And I know that this topic and this episode and this conversation is going to be hard for a lot of people to listen, to hear, to watch. Again, because this is a very uncomfortable topic that I think is so hidden, especially in our field. And the only way that we can change this is by first acknowledging it and secondly, talking about this. So I decided to do this episode because, again, there's so many uncomfortable truths happening behind the closed doors in our field. And my hope and intention is to bring light and change where it is needed most. And so much of it, a lot of the change begins here, right in supervision, in our supervision. So, even the reason why I'm doing this episode is because I want to share my experience also about my own journey and being a pre licensed and finally becoming a fully licensed clinical social worker. So, I can honestly say, without a doubt, that the hardest years of my professional life were the years that deeply affected not only my professional life and my personal life were from about 2017 to 2020. Of course, there were lots of things going on in 2020, but from 2017 to 2020 were probably the hardest years of my life. And now that I look back at it it correlated when I was getting my clinical supervision hours. And honestly, being very real, being very raw, being very vulnerable right now, those years broke me and they also rebuilt me. And this is where I received most of my organizational trauma. And during that time, I was made to feel small, I was made to feel dismissed and question about my worth, my value, my intelligence, and it even had me question why I was doing this work and if getting fully licensed was even worth it because the experience and the organizational trauma was just so prevalent. And I can honestly say that this is why I do organizational consulting work right now is because of the organizational trauma that I received within those 3 years. I received organizational trauma in other places, but not to the extent of when I was receiving my clinical supervision hours. And I'm going to say a few things that may make a lot of therapists who choose to watch this very uncomfortable. And I'm going to call it out, but not in a malicious way, but call it out, hopefully, in a way that makes a lot of us think, reflect before we react. And I'm going to say this: the therapy field is still very much dominated by white female therapists. And with that comes a lot of power dynamics that are often unacknowledged. Of course, sometimes it's unintentional, but other times it is not. Because when you are pre-licensed, your professional future depends on your supervisor. And when that power is mishandled, it becomes emotionally and psychologically abusive. So I know that I went through this, and I know that others have too. So I'm doing this episode not to be a victim, but to call us into awareness. If we want to help this profession, we must look at how we train, supervise, and lead. Because let's be real, supervisors hold tremendous power. Power that can shape the next generation of healers. And if we don't do our own healing work, we risk projecting our wounds, our egos, and our insecurities onto those who we are supposed to be mentoring. Again, my goal is not to attack, it's to awaken, because the only way that we can change this field is to start talking about it and be honest, be open, and with the intention to do better. So let's get right to the episode. And the first part of this episode is the imbalance that breeds abuse. And I know the word abuse is hard for a lot of us to hear. And, we try to say, oh, that's not abuse. But the thing is, when we tell our clients who come in and say, oh, I'm feeling this way, or this person is using like psychological words or saying these things, and we educate and say, you know what, that's abuse. And so in this episode, I'm going to call out for what it is, abuse. Because the entire system of supervision is built on power. When you are pre-licensed, you depend on your supervisor for your hours, your sign-offs, your reputation, and especially your future. And that dependency can easily be abused. Many supervisors are never actually trained to be supervisors or in supervision. What they do is they bring in their own wounds, perfectionism, and oftentimes insecurities into the room. And then what happens is like this the supervisor becomes a projection field, or the supervision becomes a projection field. So I know that I'm not the only one who heard this, especially in supervision. But you may start hearing things like, "Oh, you're too emotional, you're too defensive," or I've heard this too, "You're not ready." And instead of mentorship, you're molded into submission. And you know what? Let's call out for what it is. Some supervisors wear the license like a badge of superiority. They gatekeep, they micromanage, and make people feel like they have to earn approval. And unfortunately, that is where true trauma begins, in silence. When your entire career depends on someone else's comfort, you can't speak up. And that is not mentorship. That is organizational trauma right there. And I know, and again, for those who are not part of a marginalized group or who are not BIPOC, I've had people come and challenge me about my own experiences. And I've seen other people, when they talk about their experiences, get challenged by the majority group. And so, especially for therapists of color, first generation professionals, and those from marginalized backgrounds, the power imbalance doubles. You're not only trying to prove that, oh, yes, I'm competent, but you're also trying to prove that you belong. Supervision should be about empowerment, not ego. When we start mentoring, through curiosity instead of being criticized, and lead with compassion instead of correction, that's where we begin to heal this field. So, moving on, I want to talk about the emotional gaslighting and the professional manipulation. One of the most insidious things in supervision is the emotional gaslighting disguised as professional feedback. Again, a lot of us have heard, oh, you're being too sensitive, or you need to take accountability, or you're not open to feedback. These phrases are often masked in control. When someone holds your license and tells you that your discomfort is resistance, you learn to silence yourself. And again, that is re traumatization dressed up as professionalism. I, and this is so heartbreaking as I talk about this because I've talked to other supervisees too, even when I became licensed, and they tell me about their supervision experiences. And I've seen supervisees who were so defeated that they start to believe that they can't handle feedback. It's not because they're resistant, it's because each attempt to speak up is met with fragility or emotional retaliation from the supervisor. And I'm actually going to do a future episode about the fragility of our field too. So, and when this happens, this is not mentorship, this is projection. You learn that honesty equals punishment and that your voice equals defiance. Supervision should never require self betrayal. A healthy supervisor helps their supervisee clarify their judgment, not question their worth, and most importantly, they do not compete. They do not compete with the potential, instead, they cultivate it. And for any supervisor out there, I know that a lot of us have to do our own inner work too. And I will always say that I need to continue to always do my inner work too. So there are some supervisors out there who use shame or superiority to teach. Again, this is not an attack, it's an invitation for self reflection. Healing supervision starts when both sides can name the harm and choose awareness. And we justify this by saying, you know what, I went through it, and so you have to too. That's not mentorship. That is unhealed pain speaking, okay? And this hypocrisy runs so deep. The thing is, like, we in our field, we practice self care and boundaries to our clients, yet shame our trainees for asking the same for themselves. And this exploitation in our field is not just financial, it's also moral. And when I say this, because many gifted and diverse clinicians leave long before licensure, not for lack of passion, but because the system drains them. And true ethics isn't just about policy, it's also about justice. So if we can't model fairness inside our own profession, how can we teach it to anyone else? So, the trauma response, let's talk about this, like the trauma response, the silence and the shame and the self doubt of our field. And so, after enduring all of this, the trauma becomes internal. You start to question your competence, you overanalyze every note, every word, every situation that's not professionalism. And that honestly is very much a trauma response. And when you do decide to speak up, your voice is dismissed. You're labeled as too defensive, too aggressive, too sensitive because of your pre licensed status. Your advocacy is often punished. So, what do? You learn to stay surface level, you learn to survive, supervision instead of grow. And the very space that is meant to nurture your confidence actually ends up eroding it. You begin equating the silence with professionalism and mistake suppression for maturity. But the shame doesn't come from not being enough, it comes from being told that your humanity makes you unprofessional. Again, I've met fully licensed clinicians still healing from this years later and who are compassionate with clients but are disconnected from themselves. And again, that's what organizational trauma does is it reshapes your identity. And again, honestly, I know I'm using my story. People are like, we don't want to hear your story anymore, but I'm going to say this. Even after getting my hours and all of that, I still really think about my experience also. And this is why I do the work that I do so that I can educate and teach and so that we can rebuild our foundations, especially in this field, and that we can do and be better for our future licensed therapists and future generations. So, and to also ensure that this field does not have wounded people walking around with wounds trying to heal other wounded people. Because your discomfort isn't just defiance. Like what you're doing is you're questioning isn't disrespect as a pre license, and your emotion isn't weakness. It's proof that your integrity is still alive. So remember, for any pre license out there or who is doing this work, you're not too sensitive. You're awake. So how do we do all this? People are like, how do we do this, Paya? How do we reclaim supervision? What is ethical? What's empowering? And how does this actually look like? Again, supervision was never meant to be about control. It was meant to be about cultivation. And a trauma informed supervisor leads with curiosity, humility, and care. They don't punish the vulnerability, they honor it. An empowering supervisor asks, what did you learn? Instead of, why did you do that? It's dialogue over dominance. And doesn't this sound simple? True leaders model emotional maturity, they own their mistakes, they repair harm, and keep doing their inner work, okay? I think so many of us think that because we're therapists that, oh, we know how to do this, we know how to do that, and yet we don't recognize our own wounds and our own inner healing that we need to do. Because supervision without self work becomes supervision without a soul. So imagine a culture where pre-licensed therapists can be human, where they can question, process, and grow without fear. That's the field where we can build. We don't build better therapists by breaking them. We build them by believing in them. And so I want to end this by saying supervision should never be about the wounds that you have to heal before you can help others. It should be the space that teaches you that safe power, what safe power looks like, and that power uplifts, it does not oppress, it nurtures, and it definitely does not humiliate. This profession does not just need more therapists. It needs more healed therapists. And for those who are doing their inner work, and for those who continue to do their inner work. Because the truth is, we know this. We tell our clients this all the time, and we have to also listen to ourselves. But the thing is, inner work never stops, it never ends. We always have to do our inner work. Why? Because we're all always going to be challenged. We're going to be challenged by our clients, by systems, and mostly by ourselves. And that inner work keeps us responsive, not reactive. And it helps us be aware and not become defensive. So when we supervise, we model what healing leadership looks like. Every time we pause before reacting, every time we choose reflection over control, we heal the system from within. We are the cycle breakers, and we can be the change agents. And when we reclaim supervision, we reclaim the soul of our profession because we are healers and we need to humanize the hierarchy and we need to lead from compassion and not fear. And that right there is how we stop passing down pain and start passing down purpose. So, that is all I have for you all today. And if you felt this episode, and if you are part of the generation breaking cycles, then you know what? Hit the subscribe button. Because here on Your Own Pathway, especially about therapy conversations, we have the conversations that others avoid, especially in our field. And we're here to challenge the systems, awaken the truth, and remind that you're not alone in this type of work. So, again, if you are a therapist, or if you want to share this with another therapist or future therapist who needs to hear this to keep disrupting the system and the silence and want to heal the system and leading with integrity together, this is a space for you. So, again, this is all I have for y'all today. Stay safe, take care of yourself, and I will see you all next time.